ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So today we will continue from where we left last time. The Gospel Conversation is dated 16th October 1882. This is part of the second volume of the 5-volume translation of the Bengali Gospel. The incident which is described here is about Brahmo Samaj, their attitude, their lectures, the social reforms they preach. And Sri Ramakrishna is very, very frank in pointing out the limitations of a formal approach to religion. See, religion, if it is a organizational religion with so many formalities, rituals, if it is overburdened by these rituals and different systems, regulations, rules, and so many things, and if the sincerity or the yearning to realize God is missing, the love for God is missing, then it is of no use. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is now trying to preach, trying to tell. So the title is Brahmo Samaj Lectures and Social Reforms. First attain the Lord and then preach. So Narendra and his friends, if you remember, he sang a beautiful song saying, "Dive deep, O mind, in taking the name of the Lord. Don't be on the surface. Don't practice spirituality and perform your sadhana or upasana by remaining at the surface. Try to dive deep. Doob, 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 Roop Shagore Amar Mon." That was the song. And then one of the lines says that there are so many alligators. Alligators, in the sense, alligators are the temptations that we encounter when we live a life in this world. And what happens when these crocodiles or alligators try to attack you? There is a saying in Bengal that if you smear your body with turmeric powder, the whole body, it assumes a yellow hue, and somehow these alligators or the small crocodiles which are found in the Ganges river, the river Ganga, they have some kind of allergy perhaps. We do not know the biological truth. But anyway, it is symbolic or it is allegorical that if you apply turmeric, these alligators won't touch you. So let us not take it literally. So in the sea of the heart, when we meditate, there are other passions. There are 6 passions like greed, jealousy, lust, and so many 6 different passions, anger. So the 6 Shadaripu, the 6 enemies or the 6 passions of man, which of a human being, which which does not help him in his onward spiritual struggle. These are the 6 enemies of man. They have been classified as 6 enemies, and here they have been compared to 6 crocodiles or alligators, which do not allow you a smooth passage to reach the center of your heart where you are meditating on your Ishta. But he says if you rub your body with the turmeric of discrimination and dispassion. So what is discrimination and what is dispassion will be explained by Sri Ramakrishna through some beautiful examples. And then he says if discrimination and dispassion towards the transient things, dealing with them, but we should not be attached and we should not feel bad when the gross things go away from us, are taken away from us. Either nature grabs these things. People have a tendency to pile around themselves things and people. He always wants to be in company. But the more company is in the gross world, the less he is going towards his heart. That's a paradox, but that is what we have been trained since childhood. Since childhood, we have been asked or we have been trained. All around, we see people piling things around themselves without even knowing fully how to use it or whether they use it or not. They just feel a kind of security and satisfaction in having things and people around them. But they do not know that these things or these things which we value most in life, they normally do not come to your rescue when you need them. It is the eternal Lord alone who gives a semblance of stability to us. So that is the purport of that song which Ram Prasad sang, that when you dive in water, you dive deep. Don't remain on the surface. If you remain on the surface, these alligators normally don't come down. Once you get the treasure which is lying on the bed of the ocean, then you have no worry. So getting the treasure means getting the treasure or getting the grace of the Lord, who is seated in the inmost corner of your heart. And that journey towards the center of your heart, towards the subtle, we go from our indriyas, the subtle sense, the sense organs, the subtle organs, the mind, the reactive mind. And when we transcend all these, when we are able to deal with all this, then we reach the level of buddhi, which is at the core of our heart. And there we try to meditate on our Ishta, the God whom we worship, whether we worship God with form or without form. But on the way, this diving deep is not an easy job. The diver's job is not very easy. You will be encountering these alligators. What are those alligators? Allegorically speaking, they mean anger, lust, jealousy, and there are so many other two more qualities which is ignorance. Due to ignorance, we have all these qualities which prevent us. Like alligators, they try to devour us. They don't allow us to dive deep. So you have to be very earnest, or the yearning should be such that you should not be satisfied by just swimming on the surface. Otherwise, you expose yourself to be killed by these alligators. So that's why the discrimination, the turmeric of discrimination and dispassion, which is supposed to repel these alligators, these qualities, these evil qualities or these evil characteristics, the 6 evil characteristics which have been enumerated, jealousy, and then there is infatuation, ego, and there are so many qualities which prevent us from diving deep. So they are distracted or they are driven away by the turmeric of discrimination and dispassion. So Sri Krishna then continues. He says alligators can catch you. These things can catch you when you dive. But if your body is smeared with turmeric, these things won't happen. Then he says, what will learning avail one if he does not have discrimination, viveka, and dispassion, vairagya? So vivek and vairagya, they are like the turmeric. They, even if we have those qualities because of our old samskaras, even if anger is there, jealousy is there, envy is there, or anger is there, so all these qualities do not disturb a person. He will try to stand aside and watch the reactive mind taking these different modes. The reactive mind, which is one part of our mind, the lower mind. So the person who has developed discrimination and dispassion, he raises his reactive mind to the level of the buddhi, and he just watches dispassionately or with discrimination, taking these temporary things like anger, jealousy. They come in waves and they go. But he just observes and he says, I am not part of it. I'm not going to succumb to these alligators. I will dive deep. So that's why Sri Krishna says, don't be on the surface. Otherwise, if you don't do your sadhana with sincerity, with the proper yearning, and with the intention of diving deep, taking the name of the Lord, then or meditating on the Lord, and then these alligators are likely to devour you. Then he says, what is Viveka and Vairagya? What does Viveka mean and what does Vairagya mean? He says the Lord is the only reality, that is Viveka, and all else is transitory. So Nitya, Anitya. Anitya means that which is transitory. What is transitory? The gross body is transitory. Some of the pranas are transitory. They are almost all the pranas, they are supporting you as long as you have the body. But once you go to the subtle plane, then the mind appears to be permanent, but it is also not permanent. The vagaries of the mind, the changes we observe in the mind, especially the reactive mind. So anger is not something which is permanent. It comes and it goes. We are buffeted by the waves of these six passions. So these alligators, they don't come deep. They are at the surface, always trying to catch the prey. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says, if you have the discrimination, the turmeric of Viveka and Vairagya, it enables you to dive deeper because you go after the real. You go after the gems. You just don't waste your time swimming on the surface because you're not going to gather anything, and you risk you risk yourself and get exposed to these six alligators. So all else, if everything else is temporary, not unreal in that sense, only the Lord who is permanent or eternal, that is known as discrimination. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. If you hold on to the eternal, then there is less fear or that these alligators will come and attack you. They may come, but they will be harmless. You would have dived deep enough to touch the Lord. So that is what sadhana does. So he says, first install him in the temple of the heart. So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain the futility of rituals. He says, first install him in the temple of your heart. See that you establish some kind of connection with him. Then speeches, lectures, and rituals and all the other things can follow later. Because if you focus on those things right now, the intellectual capacity to understand, if it is in excess, then you end up not diving deep in the temple of your heart. That's why he says, what is the use to cry Brahman, Brahman, Brahman every day, speak about Brahman, unless you have discrimination and dispassion? Because the crocodiles will come and devour you. It is just like blowing a conch shell. Now, what does he mean by blowing a conch shell? Suddenly, it tells us, it strikes Sri Ramakrishna that this is a wonderful example to explain what happens if we just hold on to empty rituals and superficial things and just float on the surface of the mind and not dive deep. He says there was a young man named Padmalochan. His fellow villagers called him by his pet name of Podo. So in the village, there was a dilapidated temple, and which contained no image of a deity. It was a discarded temple. It was an old dilapidated structure. So naturally, there was no deity there. And only wild trees, Ashwatha tree and other bushes had grown up. And inside also, the temple was totally neglected, this old temple, dilapidated temple. There were bats who had made their nests and who used to live inside. And the floor was littered with the droppings of these bats and was covered with dust. So it was a very dirty place. And because it was abandoned, there was no deity, nobody worshipped in that temple. But the temple structure was there. One day after dusk, the villagers heard the sound of a conch shell. It came from the side of the temple. Now they thought conch shell is normally played, or we blow into a conch shell to announce that the worship will begin. Even in Dakshineshwar temple, before the Aarti and before all the important Vesper service and morning Aarti, afternoon Aarti, it is announced so that all the people come to know that it's time for worship now. So they heard one day after dusk, normally during the Aarti time, people heard the sound of a conch shell. It came from the side of the temple. The villagers thought that somebody had perhaps cleaned the temple and installed the image of God, and that evening worship was being performed. So normally that is done in temple. So they thought, oh, this temple have they started the worship? Let us go and just attend that puja or the aarti. So boys, old men, and everybody, women, everybody ran to worship God and witness his arti. They thought, oh, this temple was dilapidated. Perhaps it has been reopened again. So when they saw Padmalochan was there blowing that conch, and there was no image of God. The temple was empty. There was no image of God installed in the Garbha Mandira. So also there was the bad droppings and all the dirt, which was because of neglect. All those things were lying on the floor of the temple, main temple. And then they exclaimed, "Oh, Madhava, Madhava has not been installed." Madhava means God. So Krishna's follower call him as Madhava. He says, "Madhava, God has not been installed in the temple of your heart, and still you are blowing the conch." This symbolically means that we, without having installed the Lord or God in the temple of our heart, all our external rituals uh, are become meaningless, because they don't serve the purpose. There may be external show and external worship, but it really doesn't serve any purpose unless the Lord Madhava has been installed in our heart. I mean, the Lord Ishta is firmly established through meditation, through japa. You install the Lord in the heart, and then all your worship, all the external rituals which we perform, they assume some kind of significance. So the song goes like that. Sri Ramakrishna says, "O Padmalochan, Lord Madhava has not been installed in the temple of your heart. You have unnecessarily brought confusion by blowing the conch, and everybody has come here uh, by listening to the sound of the conch. It is useless, it is meaningless." And they say, the song says, 11 bats are camping there night and day. What are these 11 bats? What do they symbolize? What are those 11 bats inside the body? If the body is compared to a temple, and if we have to install the Lord, what measures we should take? Just blowing the conch means just performing some empty rituals, puja and other things, without really installing the Lord in the heart, is as useless as this Padmalochan's blowing the conch in a temple where the deity is not present, and there are bad droppings. The 11 bats, this, what do the 11 bats signify? That is Sri Ramakrishna is explaining now. He says, what will the blowing of a conch shell avail you if you want to install Madhava God in the temple of your heart and wish to attain him? First try to clean the temple, then only you can install the Lord in the Garbha Mandir, that is in your heart. Purify your mind first. So purification of the mind is what is meant by cleaning the droppings of the bat. What are those 11 bats now? When your mind is purified, when you work hard to stop the influence of these 11 bats which are pestering you and creating havoc in your mind day and night. What are those 11 bats? They are the 11 organs. As you know, we have 5 indriyas, the 5 organs of perception: eye, nose, mouth, ears, tongue. So the organs of perceptions through which we get input from the sensory world, they are mad. They are mad after their respective objects. We can't control them. We can't control our tongue. We can't control our eyes. From everywhere, our senses are being bombarded by external objects. And that is like these mad bats, 5 mad bats running around, the 5 Gyanendriyas, the 5 organs of knowledge through which we communicate with the whole world. Those 5 bats, they are compared to the 5 bats. They are just running helter and skelter in the body. The body means the temple. So naturally, when they run here and there will be bad droppings, there will be dirt, there will be so much of bad samskaras in us. Then what are the other 5 bats? There are 11 bats altogether. The next 5 bats are karma, the karmendriya, the organs of action. First 5 are the organs of perception, the input that we get. After we get the input, there is reaction. We work with our hands, feet, and all the other organs. we perform different actions based on the input, based on the temptation, based on the sense input that we get. So these are like 10 bats who are going haywire, and they are creating a havoc in our body. There is a lot of dirt in our body because of the bats are constantly running here and there and flying here and there, creating not only noise but dropping all dirt, which is natural, and these droppings have covered the whole floor of the temple. So he says, how can God be installed if you don't clear the droppings? That is why he says, and the 11th bat, 5 bats represent the 5 Gyanendriyas, the organs of knowledge. 5 other bats represent the organs of work, karmendriya, through which we do karma, hands, feet, and all those things. And finally, the mind. So mind is also considered to be an indriya, because even if the input is there, if we don't apply our mind to that, mind is something, the reactive mind is the one which gives us a unitive experience. We hear, we taste, we smell, and accordingly we give instructions to the karmendriya. It happens through the mind. It goes to the brain centers and the sensory organs there, the sensory centers, the sense centers which are in the brain. It is presented to the mind, and the mind, reactive mind, says, now you react to this. It sees a sweet, and then the taste buds start watering, and then you start take the sweet and eat it. So the Gyanendriya gives you the input. It shows you the beautiful sweets in the shop. Then your Karmendriya says, go and buy it. You buy it, and then you take it and consume it. So both Gyanendriyas and Karmendriyas are linked by the mind, which is the 11th bat. So these 11 bats, or the 11 animals, these bats which are flying all over the temple and creating havoc, do not allow us any peace. If God has to be installed, or if you want to meditate on God peacefully, he says you have to cleanse the mind of these bats, drive away the bats, I mean control the bats at least, and don't allow them to drop. The dropping should also be cleaned now and then, because you can't live without these bats. These bats will come, but because it was a dilapidated structure, nobody bothered, and these bats were just allowed the freedom. So that means you have to control the inputs that you give to yourself through the sense organs, and also control the output, your reaction to those. And then with that stable mind, then you can, when the mind becomes stable, when the 11th bat also is quiet, everybody is in their proper place, the bats don't have to be driven, they will always be there. They have their home there, but they won't create any trouble. All the 11 bats, when they are quiet and you have cleaned the whole place, then you install the Lord in the Garbha Mandira, in your heart. That's why he says, first install Madhava, the God, in your heart. Take a plunge first. Dive and pull out the gems. Then take up any other work. So all the other things, activities, before you do it, if you do this periodically, not that you don't do any work when you are doing this sadhana, but if you keep your mind steady on Madhava, or the Ishta, or the Lord whom you worship in the depth of your heart, and keep your mind tranquil, and not allow the reactive mind and these 10 sense organs, these 11 bats, to create trouble, then only you will get the benefit of for the sadhana and or upasana. Sadhana or upasana is spiritual practice. But nobody wants, Sri Ramakrishna says, but nobody wants to die. One practices no sadhana and no bhajan. Sadhan bhajan means practice of spiritual japa and all those things, and singing of devotional songs to support to develop the emotional side. There is a yoga which is known as Raj Yoga, which you do through meditation, and Bhakti Yoga. But Bhakti Yoga also includes singing devotional songs now and then to refine your emotions. The emotions which are normally expressed through anger, jealousy, and all those evil qualities which retard the progress of our spiritual life, if they are directed through proper singing of devotional songs and purified and refined, then that becomes bhakti. The emotions, instead of becoming your enemies, the evil emotions, they are converted into good emotions. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you are angry, if you want to get angry on God. Divert it towards your Lord and tell him that, why am I suffering like this? Why is my anger making me struggle so much? Not only with myself, but with others. It is creating such a havoc. This bat is running here and there in the temple of my body. So you pray to God, you first install Madhava, just Madhava means your Ishta, and worship him, and with his, by his grace, these bats won't disturb you. So that is why he says, one does not, if one does not have discrimination and dispassion, these bats will continue to disturb you. It is a most difficult task to teach humanity. Only he who receives Bhagwan's commandment after realizing him may teach mankind. So he is telling the Brahmo Samajists who used to believe in imparting theoretical knowledge, they had very little sadhana in their method of worship. They were more concerned with the preaching and giving sermons and explaining things and criticizing the idol worship and so many things they did, and try to explain the greatness of God, but they never gave any importance like Sri Ramakrishna gave to the repetition of the Lord's name, because they didn't believe in a personal God. So he is specifically addressing the Brahmos and saying that conducting these sermons and conducting these lectures and these big events and uh, discussing about God will not help you. You have to meditate on that God. You have to do sadhana. Touch, install Madhava in your heart. After installing him, only you will attain to true spirituality. So Thakur comes now. There is an incident which is very, very concerning for M. You know, M has recently come. This is 1882. So he has just started coming. He has been coming a few months. And all of us know that M was suffering from a very serious problem, domestic problem in his house, where his eccentric, you may say eccentric, or some kind of extremely worldly minded wife was causing all sorts of problems in his life. Not only in his life, but the whole family was disturbed. So it was, perhaps she was not a very normal, having intense desires and hopes and ambitions, and that resulted in a very, very difficult personality, and that was causing problems to Master Masha, because it was a big joint family and he was really struggling to cope up with his wife's tantrums. And perhaps that was one of the reasons he wanted to commit suicide. He used to be threatened by his own wife and always face a lot of flack, lot of criticism, lot of scolding, saying that I want this, I want that. So he was, though he was of a very mild and a very highly noble nature, he had a good job, decent job, no doubt. But he wanted peace of mind. And the moment he went home, all this commotion which was going on in the house, because of the extreme worldly nature of some of the inmates there, in some of the members of his family, including his wife, which was a source of big trouble. And that is one of the reasons why perhaps he wanted to commit suicide. So Thakur comes to the Western. So the topic here M is given, and you see how honest M is, because he is the subject of the conversation here. He is not trying to hide the fact that I came to Thakur with all my domestic problems. He could have easily hidden his identity. He could have said a certain devotee has come and his wife was giving all the troubles, and he asked this question to Thakur, and Thakur suggested this. He could have easily done that, but he took it upon himself. He says it doesn't really matter. That shows how sincere M was. He was very keen to solve the problem of his life, and he was not hesitant to tell his guru or tell Sri Ramakrishna, who was his guru, that I have this problem. It is a genuine problem and I'm struggling with it. So I want a solution for this. So we all know that it was this domestic problem which was so deep, which made him almost think of committing suicide. But fortunately, his friend brings him to Sri Ramakrishna and his life is saved. So that's why he says this gospel is a result of my efforts to get solace in life. And I got so much of solace, so much of protection, and so much of security after after um, uh, coming to Sri Ramakrishna and listening to his wonderful conversation and his satsanga, that I want to share this with the entire humanity, so that wherever people are who are suffering the same tribulations, whatever be the reasons, life is very complex in the world. So Sri Ramakrishna, so without hiding anything, he is exposing his problems, how he solved this problems, and how Sri Ramakrishna slowly made him adjust to all the circumstances. He all the circumstances remained what it was when he came to Sri Ramakrishna. Not that they changed overnight. He had to struggle. He had his own problems. But after meeting Sri Ramakrishna, there was a drastic change in the way he looked at these problems and how he detached himself from his worldly problems, his family problems, and how he, so in the process, he was learning newer things. And today we will come to some very, very personal discussions he had with Thakur. And he has totally mentioned those things which very few people would do, because he was at the receiving end and he was suffering. And he said that this is important. Maybe somebody else in my place would get some solace and some kind of hope. So then he writes, he gives an introduction before the conversation starts. Of course, he writes money here. Money is also another name. Everybody knew. Sometimes he used to say M, sometimes he used to say money. In the beginning, perhaps some people might have thought that this money is a different person. But because the situation was such and the topic was so sensitive, instead of using M or using his own name, he uses the name of money. But later on, he himself says, I've used these three names for myself. Sometimes he used to write M, sometimes he used to write money, and there was some other name which he sometimes used, a devotee or something like that. So Thakur comes and is talking, and he's standing there and talking to Mani, who is beside him. Thakur says again and again. Now, after listening to this song sung by Naren, he says, unless you dive deep, unless you have discrimination and dispassion, no amount of theoretical understanding will give you God realization. He says, you cannot reach Bhagavan without developing discrimination and dispassion. Now, Mani is asking himself, if this is true, then what will happen to me? You see, he is so honest about his own problems. He says, Mani is married. Now, instead of saying, I am married, he says, Mani is married. He says to himself earnestly, now what will happen to me? Because there is no way I can practice, develop this discrimination and dispassion. There's so much of noise, so much of worldliness in my home that I possibly cannot practice what Sri Ramakrishna expects me to practice. So he's worried. He says, Mani is married. He says to himself earnestly, what will happen to me? He is 28 years old. Master Mahasaya was 28 years old and has received an English college education, which was a great thing in those days. He was a MA in those days. That means he is sufficiently qualified. He has a very good degree, which would be considered as a very successful career. So on that side, the professional side, he was self-sufficient, and there was no trouble at all that he was jobless or anything. He had a good job, he had a good English education, which was a great thing in those days. But he asks himself, but there were other domestic problems. He asks himself, do discrimination and dispassion mean renunciation of lust and greed? So when Sri Ramakrishna said, if you don't have discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the permanent and the temporary, Now, what do you mean by temporary? What do you mean by dispassion? That is some kind of detachment from things that trouble you. So you are dispassionate towards certain things. You are not inordinately attached to certain things. So does it mean renunciation of Kamini and Kanchan, that is lust and greed? Because these are the two things with which he has to live and which his wife was forcing him. We'll come to that conversation because he was facing it every day. So Mani says to Sri Krishna, because this question came to him because Sri Krishna said there's no hope for a person. So he said, what should one do if one's wife says, you are neglecting me, I shall commit suicide if you do so. So Mani is asking Sri Krishna. Now consider a case where one is married and one's wife is threatening him that I don't understand what spirituality and other things are. You may be interested in that, but if you neglect me, I shall commit suicide. So it's a kind of blackmailing which was going on. And for him, it was a very serious problem. Though he says it is money, it was he himself. Then Sri Krishna becomes very, very serious when he hears that somebody is threatening to commit suicide if one does not become worldly or one does not satisfy their his or her worldly desires. So Sri Krishna, in a very grave tone, very rarely he has been so strict with he is normally very soft with the devotees, but here, because he loved M very much, he says, Sri Krishna very instantly answers in a very grave tone. He becomes serious instantly. He was talking about God and all those things, and suddenly M asked him this question because it was very relevant for him. He was perhaps suffering that, and he was in a very disturbed state of mind because of that. Then Sri Krishna says, she who is an obstacle in the way to the Lord in your noble spiritual pursuit, then he says, let her commit suicide or anything she likes. You are not responsible. Such a wife should be shunned. So this is a very drastic advice which Sri Krishna gives, which shocked. At that time it shocked because it was something like saying that you let her do whatever she likes. So after that, Sri Krishna softens a little bit and says, you see, she who is a hurdle in the way of the Lord is an avidya, worldly wife. So he says there are two kinds of partners. One is a Vidya Maya or Avidya Maya. So that is why when during the first meeting, he asked M, is your wife a Vidya Maya or Avidya Maya? So Master Mashe did not understand that. By Vidya Maya, he thought whether she is educated or uneducated. By that, he thought my wife is Avidya Maya. He said, why? Because she is not graduate or she is not a graduate. She is not undergone education. Sri Krishna says, I didn't mean that. Do you think because you are a graduate, you are full of Vidya? I am talking of Vidya, which means discrimination and dispassion. If you have those things, if you have leading a self-controlled life, a proper life, even though it may be in the world, then it is living with a Vidya Maya. So he was asking it in that context. So he says, if she is a hurdle, if in the way is, you should consider as an Avidya Maya and you have nothing to do with that. So M is absorbed in deep thought. He is now leaning back against the wall, very much worried. Now hearing this drastic solution, he is thinking, then what should I do? I mean, why is Sri Krishna so hard on me? And he is leaning against his back against the wall and worried. Narendra and other devotees who are young devotees, they have not yet married. Perhaps they got a big shock when they heard Sri Krishna telling him, because M was not a very old man. He was also 28 years old. Maybe Naren was a few 5-6 years younger than him. But in those days, they used to marry quite early. Perhaps he had a child marriage. Anyway, Narendra and other devotees are all shocked and stand there without speaking a word because they find that M has told something very frankly to M, not considering, not making it soft or palatable. And this is a big shock to, perhaps initially it was a big shock to M, Mani, as he refers to himself. Then Thakur continues talking for some time. He suddenly comes and stands near Mani. Then he realizes, perhaps I have been very harsh on him. And then he gives him a piece of advice, what to do. He just consoles him, to saying that things are not so as bad as you think. What you said is, if somebody wants to drag you to worldly life, you have to just neglect that. But at the same time, he says, alone with him, he comes and tells him. He softly says to Mani, but if one has sincere love for God, all come under his control, whether it is the king, wicked people, or even a wicked wife. If you really pray to the Lord, so here he is giving a solution. He says, your case is not as hopeless as you think. I'm not asking you to just give up your wife. But if you have sincere love for God, if you hold on to the permanent, then the situation will slowly change. Maybe because of karma, right now the situation is bad. But whether he is a wicked king, a wicked boss, or wicked people around you, or even a wicked wife, if you have sincere bhakti for the Lord, the wife also comes gradually to this path. Now, this we will find in later years. There was a drastic change in M's wife's nature. She started coming. Thakur once, in fact, told him, why don't you bring her to Holy Mother? And she receives the love of Holy Mother. Holy Mother treats her as if she's her daughter. And then drastically, there is a change. Not drastically, but slowly there is a wonderful change in her. And at least she leaves M at peace. She may not have been spiritual, but at least she does not create any further obstruction. Then that's why Sri Ramakrishna calls him separately and says, don't worry. If a person has sincere love for God, then everything else will be harmoniously arranged around it. All will come under his control. Control in a positive sense, not that in a negative way trying to control people. But God arranges everything and sees that the people who were troubling him do not continue to trouble. So she says, if you are really good, God willing, she can also become good and change. Now these words, M is writing all these things. He is explaining and reproducing all the dialogues without any hesitation. Though he was the target, he could have easily hidden this. He could have deleted this portion, but he keeps it, saying, this is what I heard. This is how Thakur consoled me. First, he admonished me and gave me some brutally frank advice. And later on, he said, but don't worry. Don't give up hope. God is there. He will change everything. These words, these kind words, extinguished the fire in Mani's heart. He had been thinking that if his wife committed suicide, it could not be helped. So he had partially thought, in the worst scenario, suppose it goes, she insists and she does something wrong, she commits suicide, then it cannot be helped. So he was in a bit of a worry. But that fire was slowly extinguished by Thakur, who said, it is not necessary that she will commit suicide if you are really sincere. If you are if you have sincere bhakti for the Lord, if you are sincerely devoted to the Lord and keep on praying and doing your spiritual practices, the vibrations perhaps would create a atmosphere in your home where gradually, it may not happen overnight, but it will gradually, people will come. The wife also comes to that path. So Sri Ramakrishna is giving hope, and these are the words of hope which inspired M. Mani or M to record all these things. He says, it has come like a nectar in my dry life. It has parched my burning soul. Tava kathamrutam tapta jivanam. That is what we sing in the beginning of the gospel. Tava kathamrutam, your wonderful words. Tapta jivanam, in the hearts which have burned by the inflictions inflictions upon it, inflictions forced upon it by this harsh world. So there are so many inflictions, and they are compared to the tapta jivana. Tapta means heated by the worries and anxieties and the ill treatment and all the different things which one has to face in the world. So tapta jivanam tava kathamritam, your wonderful nectar like words come as a come with lot of peace. Tap Kavibiriditam, because it is glorified by the, actually it refers to Krishna's Bhagavatam. It is a verse from the Bhagavata where Shuka says, your words are like nectar. Just as Sri Krishna's words, the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavata, brings about a wonderful cooling effect on the parched, burnt hearts of common people who are struggling for their existence. Similarly, Tapta Jivanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapam, it destroys all the sins. Because of the past actions, because of the past karmas, whatever little suffering God has, we have, uh, we have to face, they will be uh, cooled by the nectar of Sri Ram Krishna's words. I'm a nectar of the gospel, Kathamrutam. So that is why these words which brought peace and solace to the heart of M, though he was the target most of the time because he asked certain frank questions about his own life. He did not hide anything. He confided everything to his guru and said, these are the problems I'm facing. My wife is threatening to commit suicide, and so many other things are happening in my household, which almost drove me to commit suicide myself. He was about to commit that. But then somehow he was saved by this wonderful gospel. That's why he thought, before I die, I should share this wonderful message of peace and solace and faith in God, so that others who are suffering similarly, the stage which the problems which I suffered in my life, they should get some solace. So that was the intention. Then Mani asks Sri Krishna, how dangerous is making a remark. How dangerous is it to be an householder? Then Sri Krishna, instead of false giving him some false assurance, he agrees with him. Very surprising. Though he's a householder and though he told him not to renounce the household, Mani had thought of giving up the household, but Sri Krishna said, you continue. No, I no doubt it is a struggle, but with the grace of the Lord, you can face it. But at the same time, he does not support. So he says, Mani says, oh, how dangerous it is to be an householder. Though he's already become a householder, he's married, has children also. Then Sri Krishna tells Mani and also Narendra, who is nearby. Narendra is listening to all this. Now Sri Krishna perhaps is using Mani or M to emphasize, because Naren was there and because he was already contemplating a monastic life, to remain single at least. So that is why he says, that is why Chaitanya Deva is telling Mani and at the same time addressing Narendra also, just cautioning him. You see, even Mani says it is dangerous to be a householder. That is why he says, Chaitanya Deva told his brother Nityananda, there is no salvation for a man of the world. Now Sri Krishna is quoting this and is telling even Chaitanya Deva told his brother Nityananda that there is no salvation for a man of the world. Then he is telling alone. Naren had gone away a little further. He was not able to hear. So alone, he is telling Mani, M, again consoling him. First he says there is no salvation for the man of the world. Now the question may arise, I am in the world now, so for me is there no salvation? So Sri Krishna again comes to Mani. He is giving him alternate shocks and the true advice after that. He says there is no salvation for him who doesn't have pure love for God. So he says, you may be in the world, but that doesn't mean the world has to be in you. So like a boat can be in water, there is no harm. He says that doesn't mean that because you are in the world, you will not. But if the world is in you, then there is a problem. But if you have love, pure love for the Lord, then you will never sink. He who lives a family life after God realization need to have no fear. So he says, why don't you try hard? And why do you have to leave the family? But at the same time, you know it for certain that the worldliness should go. The love for God should be cultivated so that you can live safely in this world. If one practices spiritual disciplines at times, now and then, in a solitary place, so this Nirjanvas, which is one of the very important conditions, Sri Ramakrishna, especially for householders, said now and then just detach yourself. Why should you live with so much of attachment, so much of now and then? If you remind yourself that our spiritual journey is a lonely journey, it is from the single jiva to the single Paramatman. The connection is between two souls only. All the other accomplices, nobody is going to be with us either after death, or nobody was with us before death. We were born alone, we are going to die alone. So he says that feeling can be strengthened if one practices spiritual disciplines now and then. That's why he used to tell M, just leave your house for a few days. Just come and stay. If you cannot stay for 3 days, at least one day. If you can't do that even for a few hours, just be disconnected. Just switch off and come here. Now and then you have to need to switch off the light. So when you switch off, what you do is you stop the current, you get some kind of peace, you get some kind of leisure. Leisure in the sense solitude. If one practices spiritual disciplines at times, now and then, in a solitary place, and thus develops pure love for God. So practicing spiritual disciplines now and then in a spiritual place, in a lonely place, or at least in a corner of your home, or if you are alone, just avoid going and mixing unnecessarily, just always hankering for company. So the art of trying to live in solitude, not in loneliness. Loneliness is something different than solitude. That can really help positively in developing pure love for God. Then he says, if you can do that now and then, there is no danger in family life for him. So then he says, that's why you don't have to fear. And that M followed meticulously. Whenever he got a chance, he just ran away from school and came here. No doubt in the beginning there was a lot of criticism. His wife and maybe the other family members also taunted him, but he didn't care for anybody, the opinion of anybody. He used to somehow create this, it was so deeply ingrained in him that even in school, where he did not want to mix with others, he found a corner where he could sit and meditate for some time. The terrace, the place on the landing of the terrace, he used to climb the stairs and go there and you make use of the 15 minutes or 1 hour, whatever he got, a off period he got. He used to go there, sit with his gospel, trying to recollect in the mind. So this is one way of holy company. Even if one is far away, if you have this habit of writing notes or recollecting the memories, the old good memories, then that is also as good company. So Nirjan was first one has to go into solitude. The disturbance will be less. As Sri Ramakrishna said, if you shake the milk, the curd will not settle down. And if there is no curd, there is no butter, then you have to churn it. But before that, you need some solitude. So Chaitanya Deva also, he says, also had a lot of family men as his devotees. But they lived as householders only in name, for they lived in their houses without any attachment. So Sri Ramakrishna is giving, because he knew M was one of those people whom he had seen in a vision in the company of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he had a deep love for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his Vaishnava philosophy. He belonged to that family. I mean, his family belonged to that tradition. So he is giving an example that though Chaitanya Deva had some of his devotees, all were not single or all were not monks. Some of them were family men, but they lived as householders only in name. He is implying that you also follow the same method. You be in the world, but don't be bound or don't be drowned in the world. There's no harm in living in the world just as a boat can float on water. But one should be careful by repeatedly going to solitude, practicing spiritual disciplines, developing pure love for God, which will serve the purpose of preventing the water from entering the boat. It's like cleaning, even if the water enters the boat, one has to clean now and then. If you see the boats on the Ganges, when the water accumulates, there is either a pump or there is some method by which people would throw away the water if there is a leak somewhere. If water accumulates, then the boat will drown. So now Sri Ramakrishna, after telling this to Mani, the worship of gods with food offerings and waving of lights, everything is over. Music begins to sound in the Nahabat. Nahabat used to announce these arti and all. And after putting, giving shayan means after putting the gods to rest. There is a time when after a food offering, the Lord is supposed to, they close the door for darshan and they say now the Lord will take some rest. So that is announced by the blowing of, by the playing of instruments in the Nahabat. And then again when the Lord wakes up, that is how the temple rituals take place. Sri Ramakrishna sits down to take his meal because he used to often take prasad. Whatever was offered to the mother used to come to him after the offering was over and the Lord would be taking rest. The Divine Mother would take rest. The shrine would be closed, and during that period he used to take his meal. Other devotees are also going to have their meal with him. So the prasad used to come for 4 or 5 people, and then something which Holy Mother had cooked, they would perhaps partake of that. So that is how the incident ends here. And then we come to the next incident, which is a different incident which takes place on 11th March 1883, almost after a few months. It is the birth anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna, and it was celebrated in the Kali temple itself in Dakshineshwar. So on that year, in that particular year, 1883, the date was 11th March. So sometimes his birthday comes on February according to the Hindu Tithi, or sometimes in March. So 11th March was the date he was born on in 1883, the second day of Falgun. That is how they calculate. And the description of that birthday celebration, which Sri Ramakrishna had at Dakshineshwar with devotees, will be discussed in the next class. So let us see if there are some questions. We have just finished our, yeah. Yes. Now there is a question. Vidya with the discrimination and dispassionate avidya should be acquired both in life. Is that correct? Yes. Vidya with discrimination and dispassion, both are the companions of Vidya Maya. So there are two types of Maya, or two types of Shakti. One is Vidya Shakti, then there is Avidya Shakti. To negotiate the world, Avidya Shakti will take you towards the gross. Vidya Shakti will, which can be acquired or can be cultivated in oneself through discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the permanent and the temporary. That is why Sri Ramakrishna is insisting on some kind of solitude, because there you get some time. Go to solitude and think of the times when we were upset or had anxieties because of some temporary setback. And think of the times. It's not that throughout the day you will be holding on to the temporary. There are good times in the day when you are remembering the Lord, when you have done your japa, when you have thought of the eternal. So why not balance it? If there is more of holding on to the eternal, the permanent, and less, of course, we have to balance it. But it depends not on the time. You can't say because I was doing japa for 4 hours, I've done, but it depends on the intensity. Even if it is for a few seconds. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, don't bother. Even if you get a few seconds, few minutes, do that japa intensely and dive deep. That is the refrain of the first song which we heard. Naren was singing that doob 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 roop shagore amar mon. So don't be at the on the surface. If you be on the surface, then your japa has no value. Dive deep, do it with intensity, even if it is for a less period. Get those gems which are lying on the bottom of the ocean and see that you don't get caught by these alligators. That way we ensure that Vidya Maya, through this discrimination between the eternal and the temporary, not running after the temporary, but running after the eternal. Because if you run after the temporary, the problem is once it vanishes from you, once the gross thing which you held very dear to you, maybe it is an object, maybe it is money, maybe it is position, power, or a human being. All these things, power will go, positions will go, human beings also will go away from our life. All the things which are gross, slowly or but surely they will be taken away from us. So holding on to that, living with that is not a problem, but holding on to that, being attached to that is problematic because it causes pain when it is separated. Whereas holding on to the eternal, which is not going to be separated, the Lord who is seated within the heart, that gives you eternal peace. So a life which follows, holds on to the eternal at the cost of the temporary is known as Vidya Maya. If we have Vidya Maya, then only we can hold on to the eternal. It constantly reminds us, you were attached to the Avidya Maya for some time, it is okay. But now spend some time holding on, cultivate that also as an habit. So that is the essence of our entire sadhana. The more we do it, the more peace we get. There's no shortcut in spiritual life. So that is why he says, always keep the discrimination between real and unreal, between permanent and temporary, very fresh in your mind when you are interacting with people, with things and other things in the world. Give only that much importance to the temporary as it requires. It's not that you should not engage with the temporary things. We are always engaging with our gross objects, gross world. How can we leave that? We have to engage. But knowing fully well that they are temporary, you deal with it with a dispassion. So that is what discrimination and dispassion does. Dispassion means you do that work, but don't be attached to that. That is the essence of Karma Yoga in the 3rd and 4th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. That you do everything, even fight a war if necessary. But don't bother, don't be anxious, and don't bother about the results. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Don't be anxious, don't worry, and don't create problems worrying about the future right now. Just do your duty. That is known as dispassion. So Sri Krishna told Arjuna to fight dispassionately. He didn't say stop the fight. In fact, he encouraged him to do his duty, to follow his profession. But how to do it, he taught him. He said, do it, but do it with a difference. Don't always think of the results and do it. Just think that this is your duty, you have to do it. The moment that is over, just disconnect from it. Do it dispassionately. So dispassion here means that. So only discrimination, knowing what is real and what is unreal is not enough. You have to practice dispassion also. So with Viveka, Vairagya also goes. So Viveka and Vairagya together give rise to Vidya Maya. And if the absence of Viveka and Vairagya, that is dispassion and discrimination, if it is not there, then you will be engrossed or caught by the Avidya Maya and it will drag you deeper and deeper from which you can't extricate yourself. So next question is the last question. Why did M use so many different pseudonyms for himself? That is just to see, his intention was not to hide his identity, but he used, because every time he was the recorder. So if he uses the same name, people might get a bit bored, so that only one person is asking the question. So he did not want, he wanted to hide himself, hide his ego, not himself. He was merciless when Sri Ramakrishna gave some very harsh advice to him. Sri Ramakrishna was so frank, he loved him, but at the same time he would not tell him an untruth. He would not tell that no problem, whatever happens, you just adjust with your wife. He said, no, if these things are there, then you have to be strict. You can't compromise with the ideal. But if you really have devotion, then you will see that the people who are disturbing you will gradually have a change of mind. That is the effect of positive and holy vibrations. That's why Swamiji says all you have to do is manifest the divinity within, and everything else will be harmoniously arranged around it. That's the famous saying of Swami Vivekananda in the Raj Yoga. He says, don't bother about the world, don't bother about changing the world, don't bother about thinking how to interact with the world, how to convince the world. It is uh, not at all important. It's absolutely unessential to be concerned with the opinions of others, because that way you will end up always trying to be concerned. So he says focus on how to manifest the divinity within. If you dive really deep, if you practice spirituality, then you will see in a strange way the cosmic mind will make adjustments around you. It will send you the right kind of people. In the beginning, it may not be there, but slowly and surely, if you are really sincere, Sri Ramakrishna is promising M that they will come and they will guide you in the proper direction, or at least they will help you. They will not be obstructions to you. So that is how we wanted to solve M's problem. So M had very different questions to ask, different issues to. So just to show that it is not the person who is suffering from this dilemma is important. It can be M, it can be money, or it can be any other person. The problem remains the same. If there is avidya maya, then the problem will be there. So you have to deal with avidya maya, whether it is M or not. He has to follow the same advice. So through M, he is telling the whole world. Sri Ramakrishna is telling the whole world, this is what you have to do. And the best thing you can do under the circumstances is, if first thing is, if you can't do anything, you just be detached. You are not responsible for everybody's actions around you. But if you can, then the only positive thing you can do is increase your love for God. And then he says, by the grace of the Lord, everything will be adjusted. Now, there is one more question. Why is Pran Pratishtha important before an idol becomes a deity? If we already perceive Sri Ramakrishna lives with us, inside us, and not in the stone metal, we know what is real and unreal. So why there is Pran Pratishtha? Oh, it's a good question. Pran Pratishtha is meant for the general public. It is not meant for the sadhaka. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna, through this example, he says first establish him in the heart. For them, it really doesn't matter whether he goes. That is why towards the end of his life, Sri Ramakrishna hardly went to because he could see the mother within. He could see, but to set an example how one should worship. That is why for others, for people who believe in rituals, who are just beginners, this idea of Pran Pratishtha is very important, because we take it seriously. If you just keep an image, today you will keep an emoji of Ganesh. Somebody will come and give you. Nowadays it has become a fashion to gift gods. And then you don't know, oh, it has been given by a dear person, so I should keep it in my shrine. That is how the shrine expands. So what happens? We begin with our Ishta. Then there is one more God. Then somebody gives, oh, this God is very dear because that person has given me. I should keep this image. So I keep that God. Then I keep another God. I keep on going, adding gods. Then I get confused. Whom should I worship? The concentration suffers. So that is why they insisted that all gods, all deities in the temple cannot be worshipped. Only that deity for which Pran Pratishtha has been done. That is the chief deity, and that is to be worshipped in all temples. But you will find decorations of Hanuman, Ganesh everywhere. But nobody worships that. They will just bow down to it, pay their respects, maybe sometimes even offer a few flowers. But they know the real Pran Pratishtha has been done to the deity who is in the Garbha Mandir. So that is why if we already perceive that Sri Ramakrishna exists in us, we don't need to go to a shrine where Pran Pratishtha is done. For example, Vedanta Center, we have not done, we have kept the photograph. No Pran Pratishtha has been done. There are many temples where Pran Pratishtha is not done. But there are certain temples where a decision has been taken that the formal worship and many things will go according to the scriptural sanctions. The scriptural, there is a method to those rituals also. Rituals are not random, they have certain significance. So Pran Pratishtha is done so that the pujaris, especially in the shrines, they say you have to be very particular. Once you do Pran Pratishtha, you have to give regular offerings. In a picture, you may worship him, there may be some uh, adjustment in the time. But if you do Pran Pratishtha, they insist on sticking to the time, offering certain foods and certain offerings, and so many conditions are laid so that people take the spiritual worship seriously. So that is why Pran Pratishtha is necessary. But if your Pran Pratishtha has been done within, in the heart, if he lives inside, it's not the stone that we are worshipping. We are trying, even when you do puja, a person who is already seeing Sri Ram Krishna in his heart, meditating, still he does puja. What do? We take a flower and say that for the time being, you just stay in the photo or the murti which I am worshipping, and then bring him back and keep it in your heart. That is the essence of all the Ram Krishna puja. We keep the flower on the head and then offer that flower and say that now I am worshipping you. But to worship you, I have to take the Lord out of my heart and establish him. If Pran Pratishtha is not done already, whatever photo or Shivalinga or something you are worshipping, you have to assume that my prana and the Lord's prana are being united by this puja. It's a very scientific method. Pran Pratishtha is not a joke. Pran Pratishtha is something which makes the Lord very dear as your prana. Our prana is so dear to us. Every time we struggle for life, if there is a danger to our life, how our prana struggles to remain in the body, doesn't like to leave the body. So also, Pran Pratishtha means connecting our prana to that prana, loving the Lord dearly, whether he is in the heart or outside the heart. It doesn't matter. Whether you worship him in the photo, that is why the photo is also a place where Sri Ram Krishna lives. He doesn't just live in the heart. So Pran Pratishtha is that way important. Whether you do Pran Pratishtha within or Pran Pratishtha outside, the choice is yours. Sometimes we feel like worshipping him outside. That helps us in many ways. If we think the Lord is outside, the prana pratishtha we do outside, then we can serve some patient or somebody thinking that we are saving the prana. By saving the patient's prana, we are actually saving, connecting ourselves to that universal prana. So God can be worshipped in an image, in the heart, outside, inside, it doesn't matter. The prana, universal prana, is connecting all of us, and that is what we worship. Okay, it's a very good question. So this is the significance. Idol worship promotes religious feeling, but it is not a compensation for sadhana. Am I correct? Yes, absolutely. Idol worship is the kindergarten of religion. Now you may ask, is it necessary to go to the kindergarten to go to class 3, 4, 5? No, you have to go through that. So for a beginner, idol worship promotes religious feeling. It starts, but then you should not end with that. It is just the beginning. To a novice, if he has to meditate on a particular deity whom he considers to be very dear, that's why Sri Ram Krishna said, just look at my photograph, just be familiar. So we start with kindergarten, just as the kindergarten child is taught ABCD and all, then slow words. The same words he is using afterwards, but he is doing it as a mature student. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't need the alphabets. He has to start from the alphabets. So there's no harm if idol worship promotes religious feeling, but it is definitely not a compensation. It is like saying, I would just do kindergarten and not go ahead. You have to start with kindergarten, but you have to learn sadhana. That sadhana is going up the evolution ladder. And the higher you go, the rituals become less and less important. Okay. So I'll take your leave now. If there is any more question, you can answer. A question you can ask. Otherwise, I'll take leave for today. It is curious why rituals are kindergarten, but when someone dies, a loved one, then it becomes important. Okay, those rituals are different. See, the rituals where Pran Pratishtha, somebody dies, like you must be perhaps referring to the Shraddha rituals. There are these Shraddha rituals. So when a loved one dies, they become important because all the people are not so sensitive. They don't love their departed ancestors or the departed family members, especially if they are not in touch with them. Somebody is living away from his old parents. Now, if these rituals are not made, if they are not considered to be important, they will not even bother. They will, but you see, every human being, whether he is in the gross or he is in the subtle existence, is connected to each other. We may be living miles apart, but at a subtle level, our vibrations, the mental vibrations are connected. So also a person who is a very loud one, though you may not be in his company for a long time and may be living far away, the only way for some people who, though they were loved once upon a time, somehow because of lack of familiarity or lack of communication for a long time, they tend to forget. So when a person dies, this Shraddha, there is a system for that. There is a logic behind everything. So you try to communicate with that person who has left you in the gross, but still that subtle connection is there. So when you perform the ritual, if the ritual is enforced upon you, it becomes important because at that time, consciously or unconsciously, if you are sincere, if you really pray pray while doing the ritual, it's not it's the spirit behind the ritual which is important. So during the ritual, if you put your whole heart and soul, then the cosmic mind, the connection between you and that person who was once upon a time loved by you or who loved you once upon a time, but because of distance, you were not in touch. So that ancestor or that relative feels a kind of, in that subtle existence, some kind of mental peace. So that's why we say, let the soul rest in peace. What do you mean by the soul? It is the mind, it is the subtle body. It should rest in peace. We, to do that, we do these rituals, assuming that even though they are rituals, at that time you are forced to think about that person. You don't do a ritual which is not addressed to anyone. You do the ritual with full faith that I am trying to pray to the Lord, who is the sum total of all the minds. Wherever the departed soul is, let him be at peace. So when we say, it is not just empty words, RIP, rest in peace. What do you mean by rest in peace? First, there should be peace within. We should try to create a peaceful atmosphere around ourselves. Pray to the Lord that wherever that departed soul is, let him be rest in peace. Let him be peaceful as we are. So that is why it becomes very important to perform these rituals. Though it is a kindergarten, the rituals themselves, the performance of the rituals by themselves can be compared to kindergarten. But the feeling and the other things which accompany that ritual, the sincerity with which you do every year or periodically, you remember that, that is gives it a kind of maturity, and that is more important than the ritual itself. Though it is kindergarten, it serves a purpose to do something for a departed soul. That is the idea behind all the Shraddha and other rituals which we perform. So now, what should we do with the gifted deities? What do you mean by that? I don't understand. What is this gifted deities? Okay, I mean, if somebody has gifted you some gods or images, you're asking about that. Now, the first thing is, if it is just a, I mean, if it is not something which has been worshipped for years and years, just something bought from the shop because people, then it can be displayed anywhere. You can keep it instead of keeping other good things. You can keep it in a very safe place. But if you put it in the shrine, if it has not been worshipped, if it is not associated with anything, uh, uh, with formal worship for a long time or something like that, then there's no point in just crowding the shrine if you have a personal shrine, because that is just likely to confuse you. And whatever little time you will be spending in collecting flowers and offering, at least it will help engage you in more and more rituals. The number of deities, whether they are gifted or whether you have got it from somewhere, that will add. That is why most of the people, if they are not worshipped, they just keep the deities maybe in the showcase or something. If it is just a gift purchased from the shop, they have, actually they don't have a spiritual value as such, other than remind. Thakur also had many photos in his room, but they were very few. There was Bhagwan Buddha. When he went and worshipped, he he thought about Buddha. If it helps you to think about that deity, some noble qualities, then it is good. Otherwise, just out of fear, you should not keep it in the shrine. That what will happen if somebody has given, I should keep it. I cannot give it to somebody. But try to avoid. That is the idea. Try to avoid keeping more than what you can handle, because it is the concentration and focus on one particular Ishta. That is the concept of Ishta came because of the thousands of gods which are there in our Purana. So everybody got confused. So it is like jack of all trades, master of none. That is what happens when we don't specialize. We don't get the benefit of anything. Now, the last question. It can feel that we do it more for ourselves as consolation rather than for the deceased soul, even though we would wish well for the loved one who is no longer with us. No, it is not always true. It is not just for ourselves. You have to remember this. The Shraddha is not just for ourselves. It is also for the deceased soul. Because you see, it is not very easy to get a human birth again. So no matter, the deceased soul must have died, say 50, 60 years ago. There's no guarantee that he has been born. So it becomes, especially for a householder. For monks, we don't have this because we have to do all the rituals before taking sannyasa. So we are not supposed to do any rituals for any of our ancestors. Whatever shraddha we have to do just 3 days before sannyasa, before taking the monastic vows. We have to pay back our debt by doing all the rituals with as much devotion as possible and finish off, including ourselves. Even before our death, we have to perform our own shraddha, because we know that nobody is going to do our shraddha. We don't have any uh, children or something like that. So monks are supposed to do their own shraddha in advance. So that is why they say, after the shraddha ceremony is over, you are like a ghost. They joke, unless you get sannyasa, you are like a ghost in the sense you have done your own shraddha. So you are living in a body, but you have paid all the obeisance and all the mantras which are associated with shraddha. Though it is a ritual, it has to be done. But that doesn't mean it is done only for the ancestor or only for ourselves. No doubt doing your own shraddha is for yourself, but doing it for others, we do it with the idea that they should be in peace, at least in the state in which they are, where the cosmic mind, the thoughts that you send to the cosmic mind by way of prayers and this, when you do the rituals, you just don't do rituals, you send some prayers also. So they give a kind of peace and solace to that departed soul. So it is not just for yourself, but it is for the departed soul also. Since we are uncertain about the future, we do not know, even if the soul is born, there's no harm in doing it. The other day there was a question asked, what happens if the soul is born? Should we continue to do the Shraddha? Why not? Why not? Is it bad thing to pray for the loved ones? To pray for anybody, whether one is living or dead? Is it bad? It was definitely good. So now the last question, I think we should end here. Uh, why Shraddha in Gaya is given most important? That is because the vibrations there, Gaya is supposed to be, even when we do the rituals of Shraddha, we offer everything at the feet of Vishnu. Vishnu is supposed to be the creator. See, these are all Puranic things. How much importance we should give to it, we don't know, but it is the spirit behind that. If you really love your ancestor, then you take the trouble of going to Gaya. That is the idea behind it. You can even do it at your home. It's not necessary, but it is given importance because you take it seriously. You just don't do the ritual, pay money to some priest and said, okay, just do the ritual for my parents or grandparents or whoever it is. I give you money, I have to do that ritual, so you do it, and you don't even bother what is going on, what mantra is being chanted. With that attitude, it, even if you do, you send some money and the priest there in Gaya does something, I don't think it's going to help. But going to Gaya will help if you really consider the person to whom you are offering these in the name of that particular person who has been deceased. You go there and offer with your whole heart and soul. Then going to Gaya, and that feeling, it is easy to get in Gaya because the whole vibrations of that city or that town or that particular Vishnu temple there in Gaya, there it is, for centuries these vibrations are there, these prayers are there. So it is more likely that it can affect the departed soul, the subtle body of the departed soul, if we do it there. That's the idea. Similarly, in Banaras and Prayag and all those things, we do these rituals because of the tirtha, the holy vibrations associated with that place. Okay, so I'll take your leave. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.